Urgent, Vikings fan, look at what just happened. Nobody saw this coming, huh? But first, make sure to subscribe to the channel because we bring you daily videos with the latest your team news. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss anything. Breaking former Vikings 5th round pick on the trade block 3. Possible next teams after trading for Jordan Mason this offseason. The Minnesota Vikings could trade this former draft pick this year. After acquiring Jordan Mason this offseason, the Minnesota Vikings will likely trade Ty Chandler during the NFL draft this offseason. According to a report, the source believes the Vikings could trade Chandler since he no longer has a chance at a real role in this offense anymore. This is true considering Mason and resigning Aaron Jones for 2 years. The team might stick to these backfield pieces for their ground game. Chandler was on his way to possibly break out after serving as the backup to Alexander Mattison during the 2023 campaign. Originally selected in the 2022 NFL Draft, the former North Carolina product had a rough rookie year, spending the majority of the campaign on the reserve list with a thumb injury. Chandler came back in the last game, but after recording 20 rushing yards, it's an afterthought for the running back. With just 4 starts during 2023, Chandler put up 461 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns, making his debut with a high record of over 100 rush yards. Meanwhile, he was silent for last year's season as the Vikings had all of their focus, relying on Jones with former quarterback Sam Darnold. Chandler might not earn a starting role with his next team. However, he wouldn't need to make an impact with the next roster that needs a backup running back for these 3 next teams. Breaking former Vikings 5th round pick Ty Chandler on the trade block 3. Possible next teams, possible destinations, Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens have one of the most explosive offenses in the league, even though they have major holes in the defensive pass rush. The Ravens could use another running back to help slow down Derrick Henry. He isn't stopping anytime soon, but with age, the team will have to stay cautious of how often they want to run the ball. Henry surprised a lot of fans that he was able to stay healthy, but the Ravens might not get anywhere with a bust like Keaton Mitchell, who has yet to break out for this offense. There's still a lot of hope for the Baltimore Ravens to bring out the best in Mitchell, but the team would rather do that with Chandler. He has more years in the league than Mitchell, so it might make sense to get Chandler in the mix to boost this running back depth chart. He isn't taking Henry's job, but he could be useful in those easy chain-moving situations to maintain possession of the football. New Orleans Saints, for the Saints, they might have to rely on running the football than they would like. Quarterback Derek Carr will probably miss the entire 2025 campaign with a shoulder injury, so head coach Kellen Moore is left without an adequate signal caller in his first year. The Saints cut Jamal Williams after an underperforming 2024 campaign and will probably draft a running back. Since Alvin Kamara is under a contract extension, the Saints could bet on Chandler as a temporary backup until Kendre Miller develops. Los Angeles Chargers. Meanwhile, the Los Angeles Chargers are testing the waters themselves this season. They're hoping that after signing Najee Harris, he fits better into what head coach Jim Harbaugh is looking for. The team still needs a backup to replace Gus Edwards since his release this offseason. Chandler could serve as a rotational running back to get those easy chunks of yards to make life easier for Harris to run it up in the red zone. Pausing this news just to say that if you want YouTube to keep recommending the latest Vikes news to you, it's very important that you leave a like on this video. Thanks. Now let's get back to the news. Insider ties Vikings to post-draft trade for $293 million Pro Bowl QB. The Minnesota Vikings have made significant changes to their roster this offseason, and all of it could culminate in a trade to get Atlanta Falcons quarterback Kirk Cousins in purple and gold again. The 4-time Pro Bowler is in year 2 of a 4-year, $180 million contract with $293, $9 million in career earnings. However, year 1 with Atlanta ended with Cousins on the bench. Privately, the Falcons have had discussions with teams and have asked for a lot in return. Per sources, ESPN's Adam Schefter wrote on April 21st, Atlanta has asked for any acquiring team to pay $20 million of the $45 million worth of guarantees left on Cousins' contract. To date, no team has been willing to do that, and no team is expected to be willing to. There is a feeling around the league that a team, whether it is the Vikings or Steelers, might be willing to pay down roughly $10 million. Cousins, who turns 37 in August, went 77 as the Falcons starter in 2024. He started the campaign 63 before hitting a 4-game losing streak. Cousins completed 69. 2 of his passes for 2,328 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions during that 9-game opening salvo. The Falcons benched him in favor of 2024 first-round pick Michael Penix Jr. after a win in Week 15 against the Las Vegas Raiders. He posted a 1,008-19 line on 61, 2 completion over his final 5 starts. Vikings trade pitch finds common ground with Falcons for Kirk Cousins. How much any team would be willing to pay also would influence the compensation it gives up. The higher the payment, the lower the draft compensation, the lower the payment, the higher the draft compensation. The Falcons and Cousins, who has a not raid clause, recognize their future is not together, and how it will play out could very well be influenced. By this draft, Schefter wrote, "What could the Falcons do in the draft? As much as anything, they need pass rush help. They have not had a player record 7 sacks in a season in any of the past 5 years. No other team since 1982 went 5 straight years without a player reaching at least 7 sacks in a season. This heavy sports trade proposal looks to help the Falcons address their pass rush need. It could also alleviate some of the strain for the Vikings, who would be taking on money in addition to surrendering assets and/or players for Cousins in a potential trade. Vikings get Kirk Cousins 2027. 7th-round pick Falcons get Gabriel Murphy 2027. Conditional 6th-round pick Murphy was an undrafted free agent in 2024 who failed to record a sack as a rookie. However, he offers versatility, would be a flyer, and would not preclude the Falcons from further addressing the position. The pick would become a 4th with Cousins' playing time. Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell, a staunch supporter of second year. QB J.J. McCarthy will have a significant say in any decision, including a trade for a QB, and the ties between the two could be a greater factor than what transpired before or what has happened since Cousins left. Former HC pushes Kirk Cousins return to Vikings. The idea of Cousins returning to the Vikings may not be as far-fetched as it seems, despite his decision to leave in free agency amid Minnesota's plans to operate year to year with him and draft a quarterback. Atlanta drafted a quarterback anyway, and the Vikings started Sam Darnold after McCarthy suffered a season-ending knee injury. That could have been Cousins, who former NFL head coach Eric Mangini believes could return. I understand that they're taking a risk betting on McCarthy. They really took the risk when they drafted him. And now they're going to try to give it some time here to see where he is. But this is a little bit deceptive, because they can't really trade for Kirk Cousins until after June 1st because the salary cap hit to Atlanta would be too great. But after June 1st, it's easy, Mangini said on First Things First on April 15th. The relationship with the city was great. The relationship with the coaches was great. He might be of the mindset of, "This gives me my best chance to be successful," Mangini said. He may come in saying, "Yeah, I don't want to start." Whereas internally, yeah, he feels like he can beat out J.J. McCarthy if he goes back. And if he doesn't, he's in an environment that's great, and his money is guaranteed anyways. A team like the Vikings acquiring Cousins in a trade would take on 2 years and $90 million, with $10 million due immediately, and another $10 million due in March 2026, per Spotrack's Michael Giannitti in March. Vikings fans divided on first pick. In 2025 NFL Draft, where do we think the team should go first? It's draft week, folks. Yes, this Thursday, the National Football League will kick off its annual selection meeting, and on Saturday, it will all be over with, and we'll be wondering what the heck we're supposed to do for the next 3 months until training camp starts. As part of our SB Nation Reacts survey for this week, we asked you fine folks some questions about what we think our Minnesota Vikings are going to do in this year's draft. We had 2 questions for you, one of which had a pretty solid consensus, and the other, well, not so much. We'll start with what folks think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and company are going to do with the 24th overall pick in the first round. If the majority of our readers get their way, they won't be picking at 24 at all. Over 3/4 of those who responded to our survey believe that the Vikings will make a move to trade down from the 24th selection to acquire some more capital in this year's draft. That makes sense. After all, the Vikings only have 4 picks as things stand right now, which is the fewest of any of the 32 teams. Trying to get more picks seems like the smart play. However, as we always say, in order to move down, you have to find someone who wants to move up. We'll see how much of an appetite there is for that on Thursday night. Of the other two options, 21 of our respondents believe that the Vikings will stay put and make their pick at 24, while 2 believe the Vikings will somehow move up the board instead. I'm not sure what they're giving up in that scenario, to be honest. At some point in the 2025 NFL Draft, the Vikings are going to have to actually make a selection. Well, in theory, anyway. I guess they could trade all their picks and not have to make any selections at all, but I don't think that's terribly likely. Our friends at FanDuel put their odds on which position the team would select with their first pick whenever they make it, and there's a pretty significant divide among those who responded to our poll. Of the 6 potential options, 4 of them garnered at least 20 of the vote from our respondents. The leading position was the offensive line, which got 29 of the vote, with cornerback close behind at 27. The defensive line came in next with 21 of the selections, and the safety spot rounded out the top 4 at 20. A lot of this, in my opinion, is going to depend on whether or not the Vikings do make a move out of the 24 spot and who falls to them. It seems like there's always a player or two who drops way down the board in the first round who has no business falling that far, and the Vikings could stand to benefit from that sort of a drop if a player they have graded highly lands in their laps. Then again, since I'm part of the crowd that's hoping they trade down in round 1, we might have to see who's there at the start of round 2. If I had to pick just one, I'd have to lean towards the defensive line, but that's a deep enough position where it could potentially be addressed later if the Vikings play their cards correctly. Those are the results of our SB Nation Reacts poll for this week, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to all of you who responded to our questions for this week, and keep an eye out for the next one. Adam Schefter links Kirk Cousins. Back to the Vikings. How much salt do we need for this one? As we know, the Minnesota Vikings depth chart at quarterback still only has 2 names on it: second-year man and presumed starter at this point, J.J. McCarthy, and journeyman Brett Rypien. The Vikings will certainly be adding to their quarterback room here at some point, and one prominent NFL expert seems to think that the Purple might be in the mood to bring back a familiar face. Behind the great EPN paywall, Adam Schefter has put together some last-minute draft intel as we roll into draft week, and he seems to suggest that the Vikings might be interested in acquiring former starter Kirk Cousins from the Atlanta Falcons. For the right price, Atlanta has asked for any acquiring team to pay $20 million of the $45 million worth of guarantees left on Cousins' contract. To date, no has been willing to do that, and no team is expected to be willing to. But what happens this weekend and which franchises come out of the draft with or without rookie quarterbacks could influence how much guaranteed money a team might be willing to absorb on Cousins' contract. There is a feeling around the league that a team, whether it is the Vikings or Steelers, might be willing to pay down roughly $10 million. How much any team would be willing to pay also would influence the compensation it gives up. The higher the payment, the lower the draft compensation. The lower the payment, the higher the draft compensation. The Falcons and Cousins, who has a no-trade clause, recognize their future is not together, and how it will play out could very well be influenced by this draft. Cousins was the starter for the Vikings for 6 seasons, from 2018 to 2023, before departing for Atlanta last year in free agency, while Sam Darnold flourished in Minnesota in 2024 and turned that into a 3-year, big money deal with the Seattle Seahawks. Cousins struggled in Atlanta in the aftermath of his 2023 Achilles injury and was ultimately benched for rookie Michael Penix Jr. near the end of the season. With only 4 picks heading into the 2025 NFL Draft, if the Vikings were to make this sort of play for Cousins, it would almost certainly involve them dipping into their 2026 pick allotment. They're currently projected to receive 2 extra picks in 2026 due to their free agent losses this offseason, but it still might be too high a price to pay for a quarterback who is closer to 40 than he is to 30 and would likely expect to at least compete for a starting quarterback job. The Vikings, based on their actions so far this offseason, seem content to allow McCarthy to assume the starting job and bring in a veteran presence to back him up, rather than compete with him. I don't think the odds of the Vikings bringing Kirk Cousins back are especially high, but if there's smoke here, there might just be a fire in the vicinity. Just another potential level of intrigue as we move into the 2025 NFL Draft. Latest NFL mock draft has South Carolina's Nick Emenwari to Vikings, The latest NFL mock draft has South Carolina safety Nick Emenwari to the Minnesota Vikings. The latest NFL mock draft has South Carolina safety Nick Emenwari to the Minnesota Vikings. The NFL draft is this week as the first round is set to start on Thursday, and the South Carolina Gamecocks are set to have a list of players selected this weekend. One of them is safety Nick Emenwari, who is currently being projected as a first-round pick. ESPN's Jordan Reed released his latest first-round mock draft, and he has Emenwari going to the Minnesota Vikings at 24th overall. Here is what Reed had to say about the pick at the Combine. Emenwari ran a 4.3840 and leaped 43 inches in the vertical and 11 feet 6 inches in the broad jump, Reed wrote. Those were all records at safety dating to at least 2003. But Emenwari is more than a Combine warrior. He picked off 4 passes last season, including 2 pick sixes, and didn't allow a touchdown in 392 coverage snaps. He can play multiple safety spots, which fits well in a Brian Flores-led defense that emphasizes versatility and complex defensive structures. With the departure of Cameron Bynum this offseason and Harrison Smith turning 36, the Vikings need a younger player in the back end of the secondary. Emenwari has surged up NFL draft boards since the NFL Combine, and he appears to now be a lock for the first round. Emenwari would be the first defensive back taken in the first round from South Carolina since J.C. Horn in 2021. And now, Vikings fan, I want to hear from you. What's your opinion on this? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I don't know if you know this, but your opinion matters a lot for Vikes. I'll be back any moment with more Vikings news. Skol, Vikings!